James Dean wasn't just another rising actor. He was a cultural explosion. With only 3 major films to his name, he'd already etched himself into the DNA of American rebellion. Leather jackets, cigarettes, disdain for authority. He was the rebel without a cause, both on and off screen. But there was one thing he loved even more than acting: speed. Behind the camera flashes and red carpets, Dean had a second identity. One that roared across racetracks and twisted California highways. He wasn't a poser, he was a true racing enthusiast. Friends said his eyes lit up more for horsepower than for Hollywood deals. He drove Triumph motorcycles, raced MGs and Porsches. And in September 1955, just weeks before his death, he bought a silver Porsche 550 Spyder. He called it Little Bastard. The name wasn't random. Dean had a mischievous, sarcastic streak. Little Bastard was what Warner Brothers studio boss Jack Warner reportedly called him behind closed doors. Dean embraced the insult and had the nickname painted on the back of the car, just above the engine. But the moment Dean unveiled the car to his friends, something felt off. Actor Alec Guinness, yes, the same man who later played Obi-Wan Kenobi, recalled the moment vividly. The car, he said, looked sinister, wrong. And when Dean asked him to take a look, Guinness backed away and said, "If you get in that car, you'll be dead in it by this time next week." Dean laughed. Just 7 days later, he'd be gone. To most, Little Bastard was just another racing machine. But to those who knew Dean best, it was a symbol. A sleek, silver omen with a growl that echoed louder than any warning. It didn't just represent freedom, it foreshadowed a legend's tragic end. But as history would soon reveal, that end was only the beginning of the car's cursed story. September 30th, 1955. James Dean was headed to a race in Salinas, California, a small town with a big track, perfect for testing the limits of his new Porsche 550 Spyder. The car had only recently been tuned by famed mechanic Rolf Wütherich, who would ride with Dean as his passenger. With a low-slung body, mid-engine layout, and aluminum chassis, Little Bastard wasn't just fast. It was lethal at high speeds, especially without the benefit of modern safety gear. That Friday, as Dean drove up Route 466, he received a speeding ticket for going 65 in a 55, his second that month. But it wouldn't slow him down. Not for long. At around 5:45 p.m., near the intersection of Route 466 and Route 41, a Ford Tudor driven by 23-year-old Donald Turnipseed made a sudden left turn into Dean's path. The Porsche, riding low and fast, slammed into the Ford with terrifying force. The Spyder was crushed, twisted, unrecognizable. James Dean was thrown from the car and suffered fatal injuries. Wütherich, though badly injured, survived. Turnipseed walked away. News of Dean's death spread like wildfire. Hollywood was stunned. America was heartbroken. But even in the tragedy's immediate aftermath, something felt wrong. This wasn't just a fatal crash. People whispered about the warning from Guinness, the eerie name on the Porsche, and the idea that this car, Little Bastard, had always been destined for destruction. What the public didn't know then was that this car's story wasn't over. In fact, the Porsche would take on a second life, one even more disturbing than the first. Following the crash, what remained of Little Bastard was purchased by George Barris, the king of customizers. Famous for creating outrageous Hollywood cars, Barris believed he could display the mangled Porsche as a cautionary tale about speed. But when the wreckage arrived at his shop, accidents began immediately. As it was being unloaded, the Spyder slipped from its supports and crushed a mechanic's legs. A freak accident? Maybe. But that was only the beginning. Soon after, Barris sold parts of Little Bastard to other racers. The engine went to Troy McHenry, and the drivetrain to William Eschrich, two seasoned drivers competing in separate cars. During a race, both men lost control. Eschrich was seriously injured. McHenry? Killed instantly when his car hit a tree. That made 3 deaths linked to the Porsche in under a year. Barris, spooked but stubborn, loaned the remaining shell of the car to the California Highway Patrol for a traffic safety tour. But the car reportedly slipped off its trailer again, this time injuring a nearby spectator. The public began to whisper one word: cursed. This wasn't just coincidence. To many, the Porsche had taken on a malevolent life of its own, seeking revenge for being pieced apart, displayed, and disrespected. And then it got worse. As Little Bastard was cannibalized and spread across garages and racetracks, its deadly reputation only grew. Beyond the engine and transmission, smaller parts were resold or reused by local racers: wheels, steering components, even pieces of bodywork. In each case, bizarre mishaps followed. One man reported his car locking up mid-turn, throwing him into a barrier. Another said his brakes failed, despite passing pre-race inspection hours earlier. Minor injuries were common. The fear, even worse. Barris, despite the growing controversy, continued to promote the wreck as a safety exhibit. But each time it moved, whether to a school, fair, or police event, something strange happened. One truck transporting the car reportedly crashed for no clear reason, killing the driver. Another caught fire overnight in a storage yard, burning to the ground. Everything inside reduced to ash, except one item: Little Bastard's mangled shell, completely intact. The car was beginning to earn comparisons to other famously cursed objects. Some likened it to the Hope Diamond or Tutankhamun's tomb, things that seemed to carry misfortune wherever they went. By this point, even hardened skeptics in the racing world were whispering about Little Bastard, not just as a wreck, but as something else entirely. An object that should have been destroyed, but refused to die. By the early 1960s, the cursed reputation of Little Bastard had made it infamous. The crumpled shell of the Porsche had toured with police departments and safety organizations, but after so many unexplained incidents, fires, injuries, even deaths, people began to fear it more than they respected it. In 1960, the shell was loaded onto a rail car in Miami. Its destination, Los Angeles. But when the train arrived, the car was gone, no damage to the crate, no evidence of forced entry. It simply vanished. Reports from rail workers suggested that Little Bastard had made the entire trip. It had been seen during transfers, photographed, checked off. But somewhere along the line, possibly in New Orleans, it disappeared. Not stolen, not misplaced. Gone. George Barris, who had insured the car, was reportedly unable to collect any compensation. Why? Because no one could prove it was actually lost. There were no footprints, no broken locks. It was as if the car had just driven itself into the unknown. To this day, no one knows where the wreck is. Some believe it was hidden by a collector too afraid to reveal they possessed it. Others say it was destroyed, buried deep underground, entombed like a malevolent relic. And some say the car didn't want to be found, that it was never meant to be shown, that every public display was a violation, and this disappearance, its final escape. Long before the disappearance, Little Bastard had already gained a sinister reputation in storage. Multiple mechanics and staffers working near the car in Barris's garage swore it moved. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. One night, a janitor claimed the car's position had shifted 5 feet overnight. Another time, a security guard reported hearing a loud click, like the shifter moving into gear, even though the transmission was missing. The most terrifying incident came when a truck transporting the car veered off a mountain road and killed the driver. Witnesses said the vehicle simply failed to make the curve. No weather, no obstacles, just a fatal swerve. The crash was investigated. No mechanical faults found. The only thing unusual? The driver had worked on the car's trailer mount earlier that day and reportedly joked, "If I go missing, blame the ghost in the back." A few months later, another storage facility housing Little Bastard burned to the ground. The fire destroyed nearly everything inside: tools, tires, engines, everything except the Porsche. Its scorched frame sat untouched in the rubble, charred black but unburned. Even the rubber in the tires remained. Investigators couldn't explain it. Insurance agents refused to cover it. And Barris? He went silent. That was the last time Little Bastard was seen intact, before it vanished entirely. As the years passed, Little Bastard crossed the threshold from crash wreckage to urban legend. The world split into two camps: the skeptics and the believers. Skeptics argue it's all coincidence, amplified by myth, media, and superstition. Fast cars are dangerous. Racing is dangerous. Parts fail. Fires happen. But they also acknowledge one thing: no other car in history has left a trail of this many dead bodies and unanswered questions. Believers, on the other hand, go further. Paranormal investigators have studied the case, drawing comparisons to other allegedly cursed objects, like the Dybbuk box or James Dean's idol Aleister Crowley's artifacts. They theorize that trauma, death, and energy may imprint on inanimate objects. A few even speculate that Little Bastard became a kind of mechanical poltergeist, powered by Dean's passion, his obsession, and his tragic end. One historian put it bluntly, "If any car ever deserved to be called haunted, it's this one." And the question still lingers: if the car reappeared tomorrow, would you dare get behind the wheel? Sometimes, the scariest part of a legend is what someone saw coming, before anyone else did. And in the case of James Dean and Little Bastard, that warning came from none other than Alec Guinness. Yes, Obi-Wan Kenobi himself. In a now famous interview, Guinness recounted a chilling moment that occurred just 1 week before Dean's fatal crash. The two had run into each other outside a restaurant in Los Angeles. Dean, excited like a kid with a new toy, showed off his brand new Porsche 550 Spyder. But Guinness wasn't impressed. In fact, he was visibly disturbed. According to Guinness, as soon as he saw the car, he said almost involuntarily, "If you get in that car, you'll be dead within a week." Dean laughed it off. He was 24th, invincible, a rising star with adrenaline in his veins. But the date of that conversation? September 23rd, 1955. Dean died September 30th, exactly 7 days later. Was it a coincidence? A chilling premonition? Or something darker? Some whisper from the universe that the car had already claimed its victim? Even Dean himself had made unsettling comments. Friends said he often called the Porsche a little demon, or my death trap. And yet, he drove it anyway. Was he daring fate, or resigning to it? Whatever the answer, one thing's clear. Little Bastard wasn't just a car. It was a countdown. After the wreck was picked apart, sold off, and displayed, only fragments remained. The frame, the twisted metal that once held Dean's last breath, became the center of an entirely new mystery. Some say it was buried. Others say it's hidden in a private collector's vault, too dangerous or valuable to reveal. A few claim they've seen it in Europe, traded on the black market of haunted memorabilia. Then there's the theory that the frame was cut up and scattered, piece by piece, to avoid the curse continuing. A piece hidden in the Nevada desert, another thrown into the ocean. Urban legends surround every theory. But the most disturbing rumor? That a portion of the car, the original driver's seat, was recovered and placed inside a modern Porsche as a tribute. And that car crashed too. Investigators have never confirmed this. Porsche has no public record of integrating any part of Little Bastard into a modern build. But whispers persist. Even after all this time, the question remains unanswered. Where is the rest of the car? And if someone found it, would they tell anyone? When we talk about cursed objects, we're often talking about projection. Humans placing fear, guilt, or trauma onto things. But Little Bastard goes deeper than folklore. It's a relic of a tragedy, a symbol of unfulfilled genius, a cautionary tale in chrome and gasoline. James Dean was more than just a Hollywood rebel. He was an artist, a racer, a soul driven by speed and danger. But this car, it was never just a machine. It became the last page in his short, fiery book. And maybe that's why the legend endures. Because every time we see a fast car in a film, every time a young star burns out too fast, we're reminded of him. And of that one silver Porsche that seemed to carry death in its wiring. To this day, Little Bastard is talked about in racing garages, Hollywood trailers, and paranormal podcasts. It's not just a story, it's a warning, a reminder that some machines were built not just to move, but to take. So if the car ever reappears, gleaming under the dim lights of a forgotten garage, door cracked open, engine silent, would you sit in the driver's seat? Or would you listen to the voice in the back of your head saying, "Don't"?